What happens when you tell your husband his children are not your problem and try to push them out of your life, only for him to hand you separation papers instead? How far can you go blaming everyone else before the truth catches up with you? The day those legal papers landed on my kitchen table, I still thought I was the victim. The morning sun streamed through our kitchen windows as I watched Ellis and Mila eat their cereal, their quiet chatter grating against my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. 13-year-old Ellis kept his head down, methodically spooning Cheerios into his mouth, while 9-year-old Mila hummed softly to herself between bites. Their presence in my space felt suffocating. "Gareth," I called to my husband as he descended the stairs, adjusting his tie. "We need to talk about summer arrangements." He paused at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into his travel mug. "What about them?" "The kids." I kept my voice low, but not low enough. Ellis's spoon clinked against his bowl as he stopped eating. "I think they should spend the summer with your mother. It would be good for them to have that bonding time." Gareth's dark eyes met mine across the kitchen island. "Leo, we've discussed this. They live here. This is their home." "But I need space to breathe," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. "I work all day, come home exhausted, and there's no peace, no quiet time for us as a couple." Mila's humming stopped. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Gareth set down his mug with deliberate care. "These are my children, Leocadia, our family." "Your family," I corrected, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I never asked for this chaos. I married you, not a ready-made family that comes with constant drama and obligations." Ellis pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Can I be excused?" "Finish your breakfast," Gareth said gently, but Ellis was already heading for the stairs, his bowl still half full. "See?" I gestured toward the empty doorway. "He can't even handle a simple conversation about summer plans. How is that my fault?" "Because you're talking about shipping them off like they're packages," Gareth said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They can hear every word you're saying." I crossed my arms, feeling the familiar surge of righteousness that always came when I was backed into a corner. "Everyone knows blended families don't work, Gareth. My sister Tessa says it all the time. The statistics are horrible. Kids from previous marriages always resent the new spouse. Tessa has never been married. That doesn't make her wrong." I moved closer, lowering my voice to what I hoped was a reasonable tone. "I'm not saying forever, just for the summer. Give us time to reconnect as a couple. When they come back, maybe we'll all be in a better place." Gareth studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, something that looked almost like disappointment. "They don't dislike you, Leo. You've never given them a chance." "That's not true. I've tried everything, but Ellis is so withdrawn and moody, and Mila asks a million questions about everything. I can't relax in my own home." "Their home too." "Your home that I moved into," I snapped. "Your house, your kids, your mother calling every day to check on them. Where do I fit in any of this?" From upstairs came the sound of a door closing, too softly, too carefully, the kind of quiet that meant someone was trying not to be heard crying. Gareth's jaw tightened. "I'm going to check on Ellis." "Of course you are," I muttered, turning back to load the dishwasher with more force than necessary. Run to comfort him because the evil stepmother suggested he spend time with his grandmother. 20 minutes later, Gareth returned to the kitchen where I was wiping down counters that were already clean. His face was pale, and there were tight lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Ellis was crying," he said quietly. "Kids cry. It's what they do when they don't get their way." "He heard everything, Leo. He thinks you hate him." I slammed the dish rag down on the counter. "I don't hate him. I just think some distance would be good for everyone. Your mother would love to have them for an extended visit. It's not like I'm suggesting boarding school. He's 13 years old. He lost his mother 3 years ago, and now the woman his father married is trying to send him away." "I'm not trying to send him away permanently." The words came out louder than I intended, echoing off the kitchen walls. God, Gareth, you make everything so dramatic. I'm talking about a summer vacation with his grandmother. Normal families do this all the time. Normal families don't have one parent actively trying to remove the children from the equation. The accusation hung between us like a physical barrier. I felt my cheeks flush with indignation. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to save our marriage. But you're so focused on being the perfect father that you've forgotten you have a wife. Gareth was quiet for so long, I thought he might actually be considering my words. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and careful. What would make you happy, Leo? If the kids weren't here, what would that look like? For a moment, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe he was finally understanding my perspective. We could travel again. Remember how we used to take weekend trips? We could have dinner parties without worrying about bedtimes and homework. We could be spontaneous. I moved toward him, encouraged by what I interpreted as openness. We could focus on us for once. And after the summer, when they come back. I hesitated, because honestly, I hadn't thought that far ahead. The fantasy of a child-free summer had been so appealing that I hadn't considered the logistics of their return. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe by then we'll have figured out a better arrangement. Maybe your mother would be open to having them during the school year too. She's retired, she has the space, and she obviously adores them. Something cold flickered across Gareth's face. You want me to give up custody of my children? I want you to consider what's best for everyone involved, I said quickly, including them. They'd probably be happier with someone who actually wants them around full time. The words were out before I could stop them, and I knew immediately I'd gone too far. Gareth took a step back as if I'd physically struck him. Someone who actually wants them around, he repeated slowly. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more weight than if he'd shouted. You don't want my children in your life. From the top of the stairs came a small choked sound. We both looked up to see Mila standing on the landing in her pajamas, her dark eyes wide and filled with tears. Mila, sweetheart. Gareth started toward the stairs, but she turned and ran back down the hallway. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the house. I felt a stab of something that might have been guilt, but I pushed it down. This was exactly what I was talking about. Constant drama and emotional outbursts. How was I supposed to deal with this every day? Now look what's happened, I said. This is exactly why I think some space would be good for everyone. Gareth turned to stare at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or hurt. It was something closer to disbelief. My daughter just heard you say you don't want her around, and your response is that it proves your point. I didn't say I don't want her around. You're twisting my words. Then tell me, Leo, in your own words, how do you feel about Ellis and Mila? The question hung in the air between us. I could hear the clock ticking on the kitchen wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of muffled crying from upstairs. Gareth waited, his dark eyes fixed on my face. I thought about lying, about finding some diplomatic way to express my feelings that wouldn't sound as harsh as the truth. But I was tired of pretending, tired of walking on eggshells around everyone's feelings. Honestly, I met his gaze directly. They're not my problem, Gareth. I didn't sign up for this level of responsibility and drama. I married you because I loved you, not because I wanted to be an instant mother to 2 kids who barely tolerate me. The silence that followed was deafening. Gareth's face went completely blank, as if he were processing information that didn't compute. They're not your problem, he said finally. No, they're not. They're your children, your responsibility. I've tried to be supportive, but I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not, just to make everyone else comfortable. Gareth nodded slowly, as if something had finally clicked into place. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing alone among the breakfast dishes and the echo of my own words. From upstairs, I could hear him talking softly to Mila, then the murmur of voices from Ellis's room. The sounds of a father comforting his children I had just declared were not my problem. For the first time that morning, the house was quiet. I had gotten exactly what I said I wanted, so why did it feel like I had just lost something important? The open plan office buzzed with the familiar sounds of productivity. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the hum of conversations about quarterly reports and client meetings. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen without really seeing the spreadsheet displayed there. The argument with Gareth from 3 days ago kept replaying in my mind, each memory making me more convinced that I was right. "You look like you could use some coffee," Jasper Coyle said, appearing beside my cubicle with 2 steaming cups from the break room. I looked up at him gratefully. Jasper was one of the few people in the office who seemed to understand what I was going through. At 35, he was divorced himself, with no children, and he had a way of listening that made me feel heard. "Thanks," I said, accepting the coffee. "I really needed this." "Rough morning?" "Rough week," I admitted, glancing around to make sure our conversation wouldn't be overheard. "Things at home are getting worse." Jasper pulled up an empty chair from the neighboring cubicle and sat down, his expression concerned. "The stepkid situation?" I nodded, feeling a familiar surge of frustration. "Gareth acts like I'm some kind of monster for suggesting his children spend the summer with their grandmother. Meanwhile, I'm drowning in a house full of people who don't want me there." "That's got to be exhausting," Jasper said, his voice sympathetic. "You work a full-time job, and then you come home to what's essentially a second job that nobody appreciates." "Exactly." I felt a rush of validation. Finally, someone who understood. "I try to be supportive, but everything I do is wrong. If I discipline them, I'm overstepping. If I don't discipline them, I don't care enough. I can't win." Jasper leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Have you thought about counseling? Sometimes an outside perspective can help." "I've suggested it, but Gareth thinks the problem is just that I need to try harder. He doesn't see how his mother undermines me, or how the kids manipulate him." "Kids are smart," Jasper agreed. "They know exactly which buttons to push." I found myself studying his face as he spoke. Jasper had kind eyes and an easy smile that made me feel comfortable in a way I hadn't felt at home in months. When was the last time Gareth had looked at me with that kind of attention? "Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd made different choices," I said quietly. "Different how?" "If I'd married someone without all the baggage. Someone who could put me first sometimes." Jasper was quiet for a moment, and I realized how that must have sounded. But instead of judgment, I saw understanding in his expression. "You're not wrong to want to feel valued," he said. "Marriage should be a partnership, not a situation where one person's needs always come last." Before I could respond, Sarah from accounting walked by, glancing curiously at Jasper sitting so close to my desk. I suddenly became aware of how our conversation might look to others. 2 colleagues huddled together, speaking in low voices about personal matters. "I should probably get back to work," I said, though I made no move to turn back to my computer. "Of course. But Leo—" Jasper stood up, returning the chair to its proper place. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Sometimes it helps to have a friend who gets it." The word friend hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. I felt something flutter in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in months of arguing with Gareth about household responsibilities and children's schedules. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." After Jasper returned to his own desk, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting. When was the last time Gareth had offered me that kind of emotional support? When was the last time he'd looked at me like I was someone worth listening to, rather than just another problem to solve? My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Tessa. "How are things going with the summer plan?" I typed back quickly. "Gareth is being impossible. He acts like I'm trying to abandon his kids when I'm just trying to save our marriage." Her response came immediately. "You deserve better than this. You shouldn't have to compete with children for your husband's attention." Reading Tessa's words, I felt a surge of righteousness. She was right. I had given up my comfortable apartment, my independence, my peaceful life to move into Gareth's house and try to build a family with him. The least he could do was consider my feelings. Another text from Tessa. Maybe it's time to think about what you want, not what everyone else expects from you. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about Jasper's sympathetic eyes and the way he'd said, I deserve to feel valued. When was the last time Gareth had made me feel valued? That afternoon, I found myself taking a longer lunch break than usual. Instead of eating at my desk, I suggested to Jasper that we grab sandwiches from the deli down the street. He agreed immediately, and soon we were walking side by side in the warm afternoon sun. This is nice, I said, breathing in the fresh air. I spend so much time either at work or dealing with family drama that I forget what it's like to just enjoy a simple conversation. What kind of things do you enjoy? Jasper asked. Outside of work and family obligations, I mean. What makes Leo happy? The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me about my own interests? I used to love traveling, I said slowly. Before I got married, I'd take weekend trips to different cities, visit museums, try new restaurants. I love the freedom of it. What's stopping you now? Kids' schedules mostly. Soccer games, school events, family obligations. Everything revolves around what's convenient for Ellis and Mila. That must be frustrating. It is, and when I try to talk to Gareth about it, he makes me feel selfish for wanting some adult time. We found a small park near the deli and sat on a bench to eat our sandwiches. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from travel dreams to career goals to the challenges of modern relationships. Jasper listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. I should probably head back, I said eventually, glancing at my watch. We'd been gone for over an hour. Of course. This was really nice, though. We should do it again sometime. I'd like that, I said, and meant it. As we walked back toward the office, my phone rang. Gareth's name appeared on the screen. Hi, I answered, still feeling the warmth of good conversation. Hey, where are you? I tried calling the office, but they said you were at lunch. Just grabbing a sandwich. Why, what's up? Mila has a dentist appointment at 3, and I'm stuck in a client meeting that's running long. Can you pick her up from school? I felt the familiar weight of obligation settling back onto my shoulders. I'm not really available right now. Not available? Leo, it's an emergency. The meeting is critical, and I can't reschedule the dentist appointment. I glanced at Jasper, who was politely pretending not to listen to my conversation. Here I was, finally having an adult interaction with someone who treated me like a person rather than a problem solver. And Gareth was calling to pull me back into the chaos. Can't your mother do it? She's volunteering at the library today. Leo, please. I know things have been tense, but Mila needs someone to pick her up. The irritation in his voice was clear, and I felt my own anger rising in response. This was exactly what I'd been talking about. My needs always came last. Fine, I said, but we're going to talk about this pattern when you get home. What pattern? The pattern where I'm expected to drop everything whenever there's a kid-related emergency, but my own needs never seem to matter. There was silence on the other end of the line. We'll talk later, Gareth said finally, and hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling frustrated and unheard. Everything okay? Jasper asked gently. Just the usual, I said, but I could hear the bitterness in my own voice. Emergency kid pickup duty. That's tough. Sounds like you're always on call. I am. And if I complain about it, I'm the selfish stepmother who doesn't care about children. We had reached the office building, but neither of us moved toward the entrance. For what it's worth, Jasper said, I think you're handling an impossible situation with a lot of grace. His words hit me like a balm on an open wound. When was the last time Gareth had acknowledged how difficult my position was? Thank you, I said softly. I really needed to hear that. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the busy street around us seemed to fade away. I felt seen and understood in a way that had been missing from my life for months. I should go, I said reluctantly. Of course. But Leo, that conversation about what makes you happy, I hope you'll think about it. As I walked back into the office, I found myself thinking about Jasper's question. What did make me happy? And why did it feel like such a revolutionary concept to consider my own desires? That evening, I picked up Mila from school and sat in the dentist's waiting room, watching her flip through a children's magazine. She was quiet, more subdued than usual, and I wondered if she was still thinking about the conversation she'd overheard 3 days ago. Everything okay? I asked, making an effort to sound caring. She looked up at me with Gareth's dark eyes. Are you going to make us go live with Grandma Vivienne? The question was asked so quietly, so carefully, that I felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been guilt. That's not what I said. But you don't want us to live with you and Daddy. I stared at this 9-year-old girl who was looking at me with such serious, worried eyes. How was I supposed to explain adult relationship dynamics to a child? It's complicated, Mila. That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to tell the truth. Her words stung because they were accurate. I was avoiding the truth, that I had never wanted to be a stepmother, that I resented the constant presence of children in my life, that I felt trapped in a situation I hadn't fully understood when I agreed to marry their father. But looking at Mila's anxious face, I couldn't bring myself to say any of that. Your daddy and I are just trying to figure out what's best for everyone, I said finally. Okay, she said quietly, but she didn't look convinced. When Gareth came home that evening, he thanked me for handling the dentist appointment, but the conversation was stilted and formal. We moved around each other in the kitchen, like polite strangers, discussing logistics and schedules without addressing the underlying tension. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to Gareth's steady breathing, I found myself thinking about my lunch with Jasper. For 1 hour, I had felt like myself again. Not the reluctant stepmother, not the wife who was always asking for too much, just Leo. A woman with her own thoughts and dreams and desires. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Jasper's number. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed a quick message. Thank you for lunch today. I really enjoyed our conversation. His response came quickly. Me too. Let's do it again soon. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I'd really like that. As I set my phone aside and tried to fall asleep, I told myself that there was nothing wrong with having a friend who understood me. Everyone needed someone to talk to, someone who saw their perspective. But even as I rationalized it, I knew I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that made everything look deceptively cheerful. I stood in front of my closet, choosing an outfit for our weekly family brunch at Miller's Diner, a local institution that served the kind of comfort food that reminded Gareth of his childhood. It was one of those family traditions that had been established long before I entered the picture, and like so many aspects of my life now, I felt like an outsider looking in. The diner was crowded when we arrived, filled with other families enjoying their weekend ritual. Ellis and Mila immediately brightened when they spotted Vivienne, Gareth's mother, already seated in our usual booth near the window. She stood to embrace them both, her face lighting up in a way that made it clear these children were the center of her universe. There are my beautiful grandchildren, she said, kissing the top of Mila's head and ruffling Ellis's hair. I've been looking forward to this all week. Hi, Vivienne, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. Leocadia, she replied with a polite nod that somehow managed to convey volumes about her feelings toward me. Gareth sat beside me, and I could feel the tension in his shoulders. We hadn't spoken much since our argument earlier in the week, maintaining a careful politeness that fooled no one. So, Vivienne said as we perused our menus, Ellis told me he made the honor roll again. That's wonderful, I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. You must be very proud. Ellis shrugged, suddenly shy. It's not that big a deal. Of course it's a big deal, Vivienne said firmly. Your father was the same way at your age, always downplaying his achievements. I felt a familiar stab of irritation. Everything always came back to Gareth's childhood, his achievements, his wonderful qualities that Ellis had apparently inherited. Where did I fit into this narrative of family excellence? Speaking of achievements, I said, I got a commendation at work this week for streamlining our filing system. It's going to save the company thousands of dollars annually. The table fell silent for a moment. Vivian smiled politely. That's nice, dear. Nice. My professional accomplishment was nice, while Ellis's honor roll was worthy of celebration. The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Mom, that's great, Gareth said, but his praise felt obligatory rather than genuine. The server appeared to take our orders, and I found myself watching the easy interaction between Vivian and the children. They discussed school projects, upcoming events, friends and teachers, with the kind of intimate knowledge that comes from genuine interest and regular communication. I realized I couldn't contribute meaningfully to any of these conversations because I had deliberately kept myself at arm's length from the details of Ellis and Mila's daily lives. And how are things at home? Vivian asked, her eyes moving between Gareth and me with the pointed interest of someone who had been hearing concerning reports. Fine, I said quickly, just the usual adjustments that come with blended families. Adjustments, Vivian repeated, as if tasting the word. Yes, I imagine there are quite a few of those. Something in her tone put me on edge. Every family has its challenges. Of course, though some challenges are more significant than others. I felt Gareth shift beside me, and I knew he was hoping I wouldn't take the bait, but I was tired of Vivian's passive-aggressive comments and veiled criticisms. If you have something to say, Vivian, I'd prefer you say it directly. The children looked up from their coloring sheets, sensing the tension that had suddenly thickened around our table. I'm simply concerned about my grandchildren's well-being, Vivian said, her voice carefully controlled. They seem unsettled lately. Unsettled how? Ellis has been having trouble sleeping. Mila asked me last week if she did something wrong to make you not like her. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, made worse by the fact that it was delivered in front of the children. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. That's not fair, I said. You're taking normal childhood anxieties and making them sound like I'm some kind of villain. I'm not making anything sound like anything, Vivian replied calmly. I'm simply sharing what my grandchildren have told me. I looked at Gareth, expecting him to defend me, but he was staring down at his coffee cup as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Maybe, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. The problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that these children have been allowed to believe that every adult in their life should cater to their every emotional need. Leo, Gareth said quietly, a warning in his voice. But I was past the point of careful diplomacy. The weeks of walking on eggshells, of being made to feel like an intruder in my own home, of having my every action scrutinized and found wanting, had finally reached a breaking point. No, Gareth, I'm tired of being the scapegoat for every problem in this family. Ellis is moody and withdrawn. It must be my fault. Mila is having anxiety. Obviously, it's because I don't love her enough. When do we acknowledge that maybe some of these issues existed long before I came into the picture? The silence that followed was deafening. Other diners were beginning to notice our table, and I could see curious glances being cast in our direction. You're absolutely right, Vivian said, her voice deadly quiet. Some of these issues did exist before you came along. My grandchildren lost their mother. They've been through trauma that most adults couldn't handle. What they needed was patience, understanding, and unconditional love from the woman who married their father. And what about what I needed? The words burst out of me with surprising force. I gave up my apartment, my independence, my quiet life, to move into a house full of people who made it clear I didn't belong. I've tried to be supportive, but it's never enough. Nothing I do is right. Maybe, Vivian said, The problem isn't what you're doing. Maybe it's why you're doing it. What's that supposed to mean? It means that children can sense when someone genuinely cares about them versus when someone is just going through the motions out of obligation. I felt like I'd been slapped. I do care about them. Do you? Vivian's eyes were steady on mine. Because from where I sit, it looks like you care more about having Gareth to yourself than about building a relationship with his children. That's not true. Isn't it? You've suggested sending them to live with me. You've made it clear that their presence in your home is an inconvenience. Stop. Mila's small voice cut through the argument like a knife. She was looking at all of us with wide, frightened eyes. Please stop fighting. The shame that washed over me was immediate and overwhelming. Here I was, arguing about these children, as if they weren't sitting right there, listening to every word. Sweetheart, Vivian said gently, reaching across the table to take Mila's hand. We're not fighting, we're just having a grown-up discussion. About us, Ellis said quietly. You're having a grown-up discussion about how we're problems that need to be solved. That's not what we're saying, Gareth finally spoke up, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Ellis continued, his 13-year-old composure cracking. Leo thinks we're problems. She wants us to go live with Grandma so she can have Dad to herself. She's never wanted us around. Ellis, that's enough, Gareth said, but there was no real authority in his voice. Why? Ellis's voice was getting louder, drawing more attention from neighboring tables. Why can't I say what everyone's thinking? She doesn't want us. She's never wanted us. At least she's being honest about it now. I wanted to deny it, to find some way to explain that it wasn't that simple. But sitting there in that crowded diner, with Mila's tears and Ellis's accusations, and Vivian's disappointed gaze, I couldn't find the words to defend myself, because the truth was, Ellis was right. I had never wanted them. I had wanted Gareth, and I had been willing to tolerate his children as a necessary inconvenience. But I had never genuinely wanted to be their stepmother. I think, Vivian said quietly, it would be best if the children came home with me today. Mom, Gareth started to protest, but she held up a hand. They don't need to be in the middle of whatever is happening between you and your wife. They can spend the day with me, and you two can work out your issues in private. She stood up and began gathering her purse, her movements brisk and efficient. Ellis, Mila, get your jackets. But we didn't finish eating, Mila said, her voice small and confused. We'll get ice cream on the way to my house, Vivian said, her tone gentling immediately when she addressed her granddaughter. As they prepared to leave, I felt a desperate need to salvage something from this disaster. Vivian, wait, I think there's been a misunderstanding. She turned to look at me, and the expression on her face was unlike anything I'd seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more final. No misunderstanding, Leocadia. I understand perfectly. After they left, Gareth and I sat in uncomfortable silence, picking at our untouched food while trying to ignore the curious stares from other diners. I felt exposed and humiliated, like everyone in the restaurant could see what a failure I was as a stepmother. Well, I said finally, attempting a lightness I didn't feel, that could have gone better. Gareth didn't respond. He was staring out the window, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. Gareth, say something. What do you want me to say, Leo? I don't know. That you understand my perspective. That you see how impossible this situation is? He turned to look at me then, and I was startled by the exhaustion in his eyes. What I see is my children being hurt by someone who's supposed to care about them. I do care about them. No, you don't. His voice was matter-of-fact, without anger or accusation. You care about me, and you tolerate them because they come with me, but you don't actually care about Ellis and Mila as people. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but sitting there in the aftermath of what had just happened, I couldn't find the energy for more lies. Maybe, I said quietly. Caring isn't enough. Maybe some people just aren't cut out to be step-parents. Maybe not, Gareth agreed. We sat in silence for several more minutes before Gareth signaled for the check. As we waited for the server, I noticed a woman at the next table lean over to whisper something to her companion. Both women glanced in our direction before quickly looking away. I think people heard, I said. I think they did. The server approached our table with the check and a carefully neutral expression that suggested she had indeed heard at least part of our family drama. Everything okay here? She asked. Fine, I said quickly. Just a small family disagreement. But as she walked away, I caught her whispering to another server near the kitchen. Within minutes, it seemed like half the restaurant staff was glancing in our direction. This is a small town, Gareth said quietly. People talk. About what? A family having a disagreement at Sunday brunch. That's hardly newsworthy. But even as I said it, I knew I was wrong. This wasn't just any family disagreement. This was a very public display of a stepmother rejecting her stepchildren, complete with tears and accusations, and a grandmother stepping in to protect her grandchildren from further emotional damage. As we prepared to leave, the server who had taken our order approached the table again. Excuse me, she said quietly, but are you Gareth Marawi? Yes, Gareth replied, looking puzzled. I thought so. I'm friends with your co-worker, Mike's wife. She mentioned that you remarried recently. I felt my stomach drop. This was exactly what I had been afraid of, our private family issues becoming public gossip. She also mentioned, the server continued, her voice carefully neutral, that there have been some rumors about your wife and someone from her office. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I felt the blood drain from my face as Gareth turned to stare at me. Rumors? He said quietly. I'm sure it's nothing, the server said quickly, clearly regretting her decision to speak up. Just small-town gossip, but I thought you should know what people are saying. After she walked away, Gareth and I sat in stunned silence. The humiliation of our public argument was nothing compared to the sick feeling now spreading through my chest. What rumors, Leo? I don't know what she's talking about, I said, but my voice sounded unconvincing even to my own ears. What rumors about you and someone from your office? I thought about Jasper, about our long lunches and intimate conversations, about the text messages I'd been carefully deleting. Technically, nothing had happened between us, but I knew that the growing emotional intimacy we shared would be impossible to explain away. It's probably just office gossip, I said. You know how people talk when they see co-workers being friendly. But Gareth's expression had changed. The exhaustion was still there, but now it was mixed with something that looked like suspicion. How friendly, Leo? What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm asking you a direct question, and I'd like a direct answer. I stared at him across the table, this man I had married less than 2 years ago, and realized that everything was falling apart faster than I could control. Can we please not do this here? I said. Then where? Because it seems like every time I try to have a serious conversation with you at home, it turns into an argument about the kids. He was right, and we both knew it. But I wasn't ready for this conversation, wasn't prepared to explain the growing distance I felt from him or the connection I'd been building with Jasper. There's nothing to discuss, I said finally. Someone saw me having lunch with a co-worker and decided to make it into something it isn't. Gareth studied my face for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through me. Okay, he said finally, but Leo, if there's something you need to tell me, now would be the time. I met his gaze and made a choice that would haunt me later. There's nothing to tell. As we left the diner, I could feel the weight of curious stares following us out the door. By tomorrow, half the town would know that Gareth Marrow's new wife had publicly rejected his children and that there were rumors about her faithfulness. The drive home was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted during that disastrous brunch. The careful balance we'd been maintaining was crumbling,